Okay, so hello everyone. It's time for us to begin our webinar today. I'm Tessa Guttridge, Chair of Young Dementia Network, and it's my very, very great pleasure to welcome you to our tea time webinar, Authori-tea, based on the newly published book by Wendy Mitchell, What I Wish People Knew About Dementia from Someone Who Knows. Follow up to your previous book, Wendy, which was a bestseller, I believe. Very much looking forward to the conversation between author Wendy and Philly Hare, Director of Innovations in Dementia. Just a reminder before I hand over to Philly and Wendy, attendees can't be seen or heard throughout the webinar, but we would very much encourage you to use the chat function and use the Q&A function, because we will be allowing time at the end, towards the end, to respond to your questions. I think that's probably it. Philly and Wendy, do go for it.
Well, thank you, Tessa, and hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you've all got your cup of tea with you.
Cup of tea.
Wendy and I are just going to chat for a while, or as they say up here in the Outer Hebrides, they call it a blether. So we're going to have a blether, a wee blether, but we're going to make sure to leave time for your questions or your comments at the end. So, Wendy, you and I think we've known each other for 6 or 7 years now.
Amazing.
Amazing. And I think we first met at the women's event in York.
Oh, wow. That was one of the very first events I ever went to. I don't think I even knew you then, did I?
I don't think so, but I remember you. And I think it was the first time that you'd really met other people who were living with dementia.
It was a huge turning point for me. I can't remember how long after I'd been diagnosed it was, but I remember before that time being in real depths of despair because no one had given me any hope. And yet I went to this conference, and there I met, or to begin with, I saw and heard the lovely Agnes Houston.
Who's on this? She's here today.
Oh, hello, Agnes.
Give her a wave.
Oh, and it was, I think Agnes had actually been diagnosed for probably 10 years even then. And at that point, I knew nothing about dementia. Yet seeing Agnes on stage, speaking 10 years on, I suddenly realized there's a life. If Agnes can do it, I can do it. And all the other people I met, I can see us all around a table. I think we must have been separated from everybody. I can see us all round a table. And I was just overawed by their lust for life. And it was a huge turning point just to meet someone else with dementia.
That's amazing. That's really powerful when you remember it like that. I mean, a lot has happened to you in those 6 or 7 years, Wendy.
Yeah. And who would have thought?
Who'd have thought? You've already written one bestseller, which was a huge success. Why did you write another book? What did that mean to you?
Yeah, well, to write one book was my dream. So to be offered the chance to write another book was almost the icing on the cake. But I wanted to make it different. And different insofar as with the first book, somebody I used to know, I'd come under quite a bit of criticism because it was just about me. It was my memoir, so it would be just about me. But people were saying, well, that's you, that's not like other people. So I wanted in this book to enable others to have a voice, to enable them to be heard and their stories, their anecdotes to be told, to show people how it's not just me. There is many, many other people just like me. I'm just lucky that I've been able to write about it. But the other important reason for writing my book is because since my diagnosis all those years ago, I've learned so much more with the help of all my playmates, because dementia can be a very lonely place and you think things are happening just to you. And I began to realize from my dementia that it was about so much more than memory. But I wanted to hear from others that they also experienced what I was experiencing. And there's nothing more comforting than to hear someone else say, oh yeah, that's happened to me. And it just takes away the loneliness of living with dementia.
I love the way that you call those people your playmates, Wendy.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't actually allowed to use it in my book.
Oh.
For a very good reason, because not everybody knows me.
No.
There were some people buying the book that wouldn't know me. So we thought playmates might seem a bit patronizing or a bit playing them down. But I think that all the ones that I call playmates, they know I call it from affection.
I'm sure they do. But I'm sure a lot of people are wondering how you actually wrote, either of your books, but if we focus on book number 2, how did you get the views of your playmates? And also, how did you work with the other author, Anna?
Yeah, Anna. Oh, well, me and Anna are now, we know each other inside out. We've shared our lives together. So we're very intuitive in one another's needs. And it's not just my needs, it's her needs as well that are important. And we wrote the majority of the book just the same as the first, by WhatsApp and email, because I can't use the phone. And just like the first one, emojis take on a whole new meaning, because Anna will WhatsApp me in the morning to say which bit we're writing about. And then I'd send back an emoji going, oh no, oh, whatever the subject was, the appropriate emoji. But to bring in others, that gave Anna a chance to meet other people with dementia. And she fell in love with all my playmates. She adored them. We interviewed some by Zoom, and I was forever saying on the Zoom calls to Anna, oh, you're going to have to stop me if we go off piste, because we'll just get totally distracted, which we often did. But Anna would bring us back to the subject we were talking about. But also my support group, Minds and Voices in York, they played a huge part in gathering information as well. Because at the time, at the time we were meeting via Zoom, it was during COVID. And I used to set them homework every week. And the following week, I'd ask them all questions. I'd ask them the questions, and they could either email me back the answers, or they could just chat and talk as things came into their head on the day. but the power of numbers shouldn't be underestimated, because it makes things more real to those outside. So whereas the criticism came about me from my first book, then I have the power of all my friends around me for the second one, because no one should be alone with dementia. And I'd just like to add that I also had the help of some wonderful researchers. Special mention to Professor Jan Bodie from Bradford and Dr. Julie Christie, because they put up with my countless emails saying, do you know of any research on X, Y, and Z? And they just come back quite quickly and freely saying, oh, have a look at this, have a look at that. So without them, I couldn't have put the extra work into the book that we wanted to, through evidence and research. Have I gone off piece now? Because I've...
No, you haven't.
No, I'm all right.
You're
Okay.
completely on piece.
Okay.
Completely on piece. And what a fascinating kind of glimpse into the process, which does sound really collaborative, which is a really great example of people with dementia taking the lead, but working with partners and allies. Yeah,
we work on an equal footing. It's 50-50 on everything. So Anna uses her skill to work the magic, I say, into the book, and I use my skill of actually living with dementia. So, you know, both that's equally important.
Okay, Wendy, so you've very kindly promised to actually read out a couple of excerpts from your book. You've been talking a lot, so take your time and have a glass of water if you want, or whatever. We can wait, or a cup of tea, obviously. And I think the first of the two excerpts that you're going to read is about the gifts.
Yeah, if you only look at the negatives of dementia, you can get very depressed. And I call some things the gifts of dementia, mainly because I know perfectly well that dementia would hate to have the thought of it giving us a gift. But this is an excerpt that shows what I call a gift from dementia. Dementia can be cruel in so many ways, yet every so often it hands us a gift in a most unexpected form. It was a bright day in the garden, and the sun was starting its descent, streaking long shadows of the fence across the lawn. I was pottering inside, shuffling from one room to another, with a cup of tea in hand, trying to decide where to sit. Suddenly, through the glass of the double doors, something caught my eye. It took a while for the silhouette to make a recognizable figure, but it was then that I saw the unmistakable shape of him, a man standing in the middle of my lawn. My father. But then he must have been dead 20 years. Should I have been frightened to see him in all his incredible yet ordinary detail? He was wearing his familiar baggy green cardigan, his happy, casual clothes that he wore to potter in his own garden shed. And on his face was the same relaxed smile. A tip of mine for visual hallucinations is to take a photograph on your phone or iPad of what you think you can see, And if it's in the picture, it's most likely there in real life. But in that moment, I didn't want to break the spell. He stood, just looking at me, his hands hanging by his side. Even the yellow of his nicotine-stained fingers visible from this distance. His hair was styled with brill cream as it always was, black and shiny. The last of the sun reflected back from the black quiff that never went grey. I was reminded as we stood looking back at one another of the times I would climb onto his lap as a child, and he would pay me a penny per grey hair that I could find and pull from his scalp. The memory of that moment returned to me, to the warmth of his touch, the sweet sugary scent of this brill cream, and its bright red pot. I don't know how long we stood looking at each other. Could have been minutes, hours. Dementia has a funny relationship with time. The logical part of my knew that what I was seeing was not real. I knew the disease had a habit of playing tricks on my brain. And normally I would use my 30-minute rule, walking away and returning half an hour later to know for sure whether what I saw was still there. But this time, I simply stopped and stared, determined to enjoy this gift that dementia had granted me, because they are so few and far between.
Thank you, Wendy. That's lovely. And I should just say, while you've been reading, I've just quickly been looking at the chat. I was listening, honest.
Yeah.
But we're having some absolutely wonderful feedback, and people are just loving you, hearing you read your own book. And I think, am I right that in this, for this book, the audible version is you yourself reading?
Actually, me reading.
Actually,
that's weird, hearing me read.
So that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So I've got lots more things to ask you, and one of them is that kind of underlying everything in this book, I think, is your absolute determination to find workarounds for all the barriers that you come across. Mm. And I've heard you using the phrase outmaneuvering dementia. Mm. Could you say a little bit more about that attitude and maybe one or two things that you've outmaneuvered?
Well, I always say I'm lucky to live alone, which probably sounds very strange to some people. But living alone means I have to find a way to outmaneuver, outwit dementia when it throws anything at me. Otherwise, I can't live alone. So I see it as a game with dementia. I don't get frustrated because that's a waste of energy. What I do is try and solve the problem of what is it that I can no longer do as I once did, and can I do it differently? Is there a workaround to enable me to still do that one thing? But my mantra is there's always a way. And if I can't solve it, well, I'll bring in Team Mitchell and my daughters will help me solve it. But the little things like I used to fall up and down the steps into my garden, or even up to my front door. People were forever dragging me out of my garden, lifting me out because I'd fallen over, because I couldn't see the edge of the step. And all I did was paint luminous yellow stripe, just one luminous yellow stripe down each step. And now I can see the steps. And I'm not saying I never fall over. That would be a lie. But I don't fall over quite as frequently now as I did But something so simple can be the difference between someone feeling comfortable going out of their house and coming back, and someone feeling imprisoned in their home because they fear going out. So simple things like that can make all the difference between calmness and giving in to dementia. And another simple thing was I could never find the light switches because they're white and my walls are light as well. And so I was forever forgetting where the light switches are, and I couldn't see it because there was no contrast. Contrast is so important for people with dementia. So again, so simple a solution. I just painted a royal blue border around my light switches. And now they stand out like a Belisha beacon for me when I need to find a light. But there's so many tiny things that can make so much difference.
Thanks, Wendy. And you mentioned while you were talking, your daughters, who I know are the most important people to you, apart from maybe Billy the cat.
Oh, yeah. And Merlin the dog. Merlin the dog now as well. I'm afraid Billy has shared.
Okay. So Jem and Sarah, they don't live with you, or you don't live with them. And I know that early on, you had some quite, intense conversations with them about their need to support you and your need to keep your independence. Could you just say a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson we learned as a family was the power of talking. And families often find that quite difficult because you rarely are put in that situation where you have to talk really deeply about the reversal of roles that is gradually happening. And I wanted them to know that this is a two-way process. This isn't just about me. When I got the diagnosis, so did my daughters, and their needs are just as important as mine. They're just different. And so I told them that I want to know what you're not understanding just as much as you want to know what I'm struggling with, because then we can help each other. It's a two-way process, because if you don't talk, how is anybody going to help you? If you don't talk, how is anybody going to know what you need help with? And if you don't talk, how does anybody know what you might want when you're no longer able to talk? And those, I don't call them difficult conversations, I call them uncomfortable, because they're not difficult to say the words, they're just uncomfortable to say them. But everybody should have those conversations just to be able to help one another. And then you can park it and carry on living your life until the next problem arises.
And I know that some of the sort of strategies that the three of you have come up with have involved technology. And I know that Sarah, at least, maybe Gemma too, are frequently, sending you little reminders or checking where you are, and they use a tracker or you use a tracker. And you've promised the second excerpt that you said you would like to read us is about technology. So again, take your time, have a sip of tea, because it's you that's doing all the talking. And when you're ready, we'd love to hear that.
Okay. Yeah, well, just to fill in the background, I hadn't used technology before dementia. I didn't even know what an iPad was, what a smartphone was, what on earth was an app, a blog, any of those things. So never think people with dementia can't learn new things, because it just takes the patience. I had the enormous patience of my daughters to repeat again, draw me little diagrams, everything. But now, and I'll read this piece, my iPad and iPhone are my door to the world now, my constant companions who never leave my side. My phone is instantly set when I have to remember something. The reminders are constantly pinging in my ear, some daily, like remembering to eat, some one-offs, like remembering to check on a friend who was feeling unwell. If something occurs to me that I need to do and I'm out for a walk, I simply set a reminder immediately on my phone for when I get home. Otherwise, the thought would be lost among my footsteps. Technology has proved to be a godsend for my daughters too, who didn't have to worry where I was once they loaded a simple tracker onto my phone. It works both ways, telling me where I am too. I've numerous apps that make my life calmer and easier to navigate. For example, thanks to my train app, my love of travel has remained unhindered because it sends me alerts if my connection is delayed and lets me know which platform I need to be on. My London Tube app tells me which station and line I need without having to stare goggle-eyed at that wiggling map with all its different colours. Alexa is another best friend of mine. She's there as a reminder to take them. She just piped up. She's there as a reminder to take my medication, but so much more than that. When I kept falling on the stairs, I discovered I could ask Alexa to switch the lights on upstairs before I even went upstairs. I can even get her to boil the kettle for me, all from the comfort of my bed. I plod downstairs in the morning and can already hear the rumble of the element kicking into action. Like many other friends, we experience miscommunications too. Sometimes Alexa doesn't understand my stammering commands if I ask her to switch the kettle on, and instead she's given me the weather forecast. I'll just do it myself, shall I, Alexa? I say, rolling my eyes. To which she mutters something about not understanding, and we go round in circles before someone gives up, usually me. Many of my friends have Alexa too, and they all find it helpful to cope with life with dementia in tow. We've discovered, though, that it's not too helpful when we're singing her praises on a Zoom call. One day, as we all sat around complimenting Alexa, her ears pricked up at the sound of her name, and suddenly chaos ensued as all over robots started chattering at once. Mine even started to play Beethoven's Symphony No. 5. There was much hilarity as we all started yelling, "Stop!" to our individual Alexas, and then fell about laughing. It is true that technology can be a blessing as well as a curse.
Brilliant and very funny as well. And people are actually pushing on the chat that you've been setting off their Alexa now.
Oh, good. That's good.
Let's all say it aloud. Alexa, Alexa.
Yay! Yeah.
Okay. So take it a little bit more serious note now, Wendy. Some people might read your books and feel a bit depressed that they can't do what you can, or that they've left it too late, or the person they support has left it too late. What would you say to them?
Well, to the people who have said they can't do what I can, that actually led to me changing the phrase living well with dementia. Because I realized from the emails I got and through the conversations I was having that it set such a high standard that not everyone believed they could attain. So instead now I prefer a long-winded one of living as well as your circumstances allow. And no, it doesn't fit easy onto PowerPoints. It doesn't trip off the tongue as easy as people would like, but it makes other people feel so much more capable of achieving something. Because for some people, living as well as they can might mean just getting out of bed one day. And to me, that's a huge achievement. So no matter how small, how big the achievement is, celebrate it, because every single one is just as important as the rest. And for those who I've had so many emails saying, oh, I wish I'd had your book sooner. I wish I'd had your book when my mum was alive. And what I say to them is that I'm sure you did the best that you could possibly could do with the knowledge that you had at the time, because there's no point in dwelling on what might have been, because you can't change it. So you've learned a lot now, so use it.
Thanks, Wendy. I know we've got about 10 more minutes before we open.
Oh my goodness, where did that go?
I know.
Oh goodness.
So we've got about 10 more minutes before we open up to questions, and I can see some questions coming in. If you put them in the chat, it would be more helpful, I think, if you could copy and paste them into the Q&A. But if you can't do that, we'll try to find them. You wanted to say a little bit, I think, Wendy, about your relationship with food and drink.
Oh, yes. I mean, this is one of the things I wish people knew about dementia, because it might help them make sense of some of the things that are happening to their loved ones. I don't feel hunger anymore. I haven't felt hunger for probably 2 years or 3 years, something like that. And so you can imagine how difficult it is to eat when you don't feel hunger. So the way I get round it, because food is just fuel, that's all it is now. It's lost its social appeal, it's lost its taste. It is just fuel. And the way I get round it is to tell myself that if I don't eat, I can't go out for my walks, which I adore. So that's my way of instilling into my head that I have to eat. But I also eat the same things every day, which I had an email from someone recently saying, oh, you're not getting all the vitamins, you're not getting a varied diet and all the rest of it. But my GP, who is absolutely wonderful since reading my book, she checks my blood. And if I'm short of anything, she tells me. And it's amazing what you can constantly eat and not be short of anything. Every now and then my body will tell me, okay, I've had enough of fish pie, give me something else. But I then have to find something that will appeal to me. And that's often the difficult bit, the change.
Yeah.
But also, you know, if someone sat in front of a plate untouched, is it because the plate is the wrong colour? They can't see the food, because white rice on a white plate, I wouldn't be able to see. So colour and contrast, again, so important. But I get in a muddle with a knife and fork now. The coordination's gone. So I just use a fork and a spoon. And instead of having a plate, because everything gets shoveled off, I use a bowl just to make it easier. So just ask those questions if someone is sat with food in front of them. Is it because they've forgotten how to eat? Is it because they don't feel hunger? Is it because they need encouragement? Is it because it's on the wrong colour plate, the wrong type of plate? But also my dearly beloved Yorkshire tea, which I'm sure I kept them in business. Sadly, my dementia has taken away the taste of Yorkshire tea as well. And it began to taste bizarrely like Swede. Goodness knows why. That was a very cruel trick of dementia. And Yorkshire tea even sent me a big box of all their different varieties just to try and keep me on board. But I do still drink my Yorkshire tea because A, I've got to drink, but it's simply coloured water now. It's what I do love is that hug in a mug. So that's what makes me drink my weak Yorkshire tea, but my hug in a mug mainly.
You mentioned that one of the reasons that you make sure you keep eating and eating well is because of your love of walking, Wendy.
Yeah.
And I know that particularly during the lockdown times, you walked more and more, you regained your confidence, and you started taking lots of wonderful photos, and that helped you to build a relationship with your local village. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think we all learned an awful lot about ourselves during COVID, but also the power of the community and what it gave people. And just like so many people at the beginning of COVID, I really struggled because I'd lost my routine of traveling, just like everybody else lost their routine. But for people with dementia, routine is so important. So I had to find a new routine. And by pure chance, I bought a camera. And so I started to explore my village, which before I'd not had the time because I was always traveling. But I suddenly saw what a beautiful place I lived in. And I started going out for my daily walks. I think we were allowed one or something. I might have sneaked two in, but I think we were allowed one. And I take photos of all the magic moments that I saw. You know, just a robin singing in a tree that if you weren't looking, you'd miss. And I realized my village had a Facebook page. So I started to post my photos on the village Facebook page. And I had such an amazing response. Some from people saying, oh, we're having to, what's it called? We're having to isolate or whatever. So it's so wonderful to see what's going on in the village. Others were saying, wow, we we never knew those things were in our village. And people used to started to call me the camera lady. Many didn't know I had dementia then. So they saw the talent I had before the dementia, so that when they realized I did have dementia, they saw dementia in a whole new light. They didn't just see the dementia and forget everything else. They saw dementia as something that came along for a walk with me, but they saw mainly the photographs that I took. And so it was so wonderful. I never forget that first time somebody called me the camera lady. And it was such a joy, for I wasn't Wendy with dementia who took a camera out. I was the camera lady.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So I think we'll just have one more brief question, Wendy, and then we'll have a look at what questions have come in for us.
Okay.
Again, have another sip of tea if you want, because you're doing all the hard work here. So the last question takes us back to the book, and it is, what do you hope that people will get out from this book?
Well, first and foremost, I hope they get out that dementia is about so much more than memory. Because if you only see that tiny part of someone, the memory loss, you're missing so much else that you can help with. But mainly, I want my books to show people how you should never give up on yourself. Other people will do that quite happily for you, but never give up on yourself, because you never know what achievements you might achieve, or what opportunities might come your way if you're given the chance. So never give up on yourself.
Thank you, Wendy. That's a wonderful message. Right, I'm going to have a look while you have a brief rest. I'm just going to have a look at the questions and see what we've got coming in. We might not have time for all of them, but let's see how we're going. So, well, this one's a comment, I think, that you might have something to say. After hearing you speak, your red pillow over a television screen on a wall when it's off has helped many people in Lincolnshire. Can you explain what that means? I'm not sure everyone will understand.
Yeah, it goes back to colour, the colour again. And for me, not for everybody with dementia, but for me, black is such a bad colour, because a black mat on the floor just looks like a gaping hole. A shiny black floor looks like I'm going to have to swim for my life. But when televisions are switched off, they're black. And to me, they look like a hole in the wall, a hole in the corner. And I have a fabulous B&B that I stay in Keswick. And when Catherine had read my book, I turned up one visit and she'd put a red pillowcase over my screen just to break up the black and stop a hole appearing in the wall. So I'm so glad the people of Lincolnshire are benefiting from that.
And hopefully many more will be as well now, not just the Lincolnshire people. Yeah. Okay. We've got a question from Federico Allegro, who's been making lots of comments. I think he's a huge fan of yours. Yeah. Federico says, Wendy, do you think that writing and being that active somehow delayed your cognitive deterioration?
Oh, I can't tell you how much I believe that. The most important thing you can do to keep dementia at arm's length is to do whatever makes you happy. I can type quicker than I can speak and think the words, because that part of my brain hasn't been affected yet. And so typing for me is my escape from dementia. But it also helps to keep your brain stimulated, because there's nothing more comforting with dementia than just sat with your eyes closed, doing nothing, no stimulation. But that's dementia's cruel trick of making you feel calm in its company, because dementia can take over in no time at all. We all need to rest, as I will need to after this, but it's knowing when to stop doing nothing and to stimulate your brain again. Because trust me, dementia will seep in if you don't continue doing. And that's why I hate to see people sometimes in care homes sat in a circle just staring at the TV. They can't talk to one another because the TV's on, and they can't do something because the TV's on. So just switch the TV off and get them to join in and do something together.
Thank you. Okay, we've got a question from, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Happy Eden Ip. Is that right? Sorry if it's not. And she says, Wendy, will you feel comfortable to seek some help while you're living alone? And I know that you have recently got a bit of help in. So maybe you could just tell us briefly about that. We haven't got very long left.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, my daughters suddenly told me I needed a cleaner. I can't imagine why, but they thought it was a good idea that I got a cleaner. So along came Tina the cleaner, my wonderful magic fairy. But I hadn't realised how hard it is to get used to having someone in the house, because I can't stay in when she's here, because I forget she's here and then I hear noises downstairs and don't know what they are. So we're gradually learning to adapt to one another. She's now stopped screwing all my tops on too tight because I can't open them. But she also knows how important it is for me to go out for a walk when she's here. I'm not being rude, I'm just doing away with the anxiety of having someone in my house. So yes, I do. I will and do accept help when I need it.
Thank you. We've got about 10 more minutes, Wendy, but I'm conscious that I'm firing questions. Would you like a couple of minutes break?
No, I'm all right. Thank you.
Okay. So we've got a question from Helen Riddle. And she says, Wendy, what changes would you most like to see in society to make the world better for people living with dementia and for everyone else, no doubt?
Well, we always say if you get it right for people with dementia, you get it right for so many others. I've forgotten the question now.
So Helen is saying, what changes would you most like to see in society to make the world better?
I'd like them to read my book.
Have you just written a book?
Yeah. But also to talk to us. You know, people fear dementia, and they often fear talking to us. It's that fear of the unknown. And if only they can see dementia in a different light of, yes, it is a bummer of a diagnosis, no getting away from that. But there's still so much life we can live. But also the biggest change needs to come from the clinical world. The whole process of being diagnosed is so negative that you come out. I came out feeling as though it was the end 7, 8 years ago, whatever it was. I still get emails today saying they feel just the same, so nothing has changed. Yes, they have to concentrate on the clinical workings of our brain to give the diagnosis, but then turn that diagnosis round. And instead of saying, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do, simply say, yes, it is dementia and not something anyone would wish to have. And there is nothing I can do. But there is still so much you can still do. Still so much life you have to live. How differently people would leave the consulting room with hope instead of despair. Just those small changes in language could make a whole lot of difference.
Indeed, and we've got lots of people coming in on the chat talking about their experiences, which haven't all been good. You won't be surprised to hear, but I'm sure they're feeling hugely inspired by what you're saying, and so many people are saying that, Wendy. Let me just go back to the Q's and A's a minute. We've got a question from Sue Newsom, who is asking whether there should be more discussion about dementia in schools and more intergenerational activities.
Young people just, I always say students are my favorite species because they're like sponges just wanting to soak up knowledge. I went to my village school and the whole of the school came into the hall to listen to me. And they'd done this amazing display of forget-me-not flowers and just a huge, joyful display. And for them, I used a ball of wool to tell them what dementia was like. I got some of them out on the floor and I tangled the wool all around them. And I said that you're the brain and your brains work wonderfully. You're so clever. And then I just snipped these strands of wool and said, some of my brain just goes a bit wonky and doesn't quite do what it's supposed to. And sometimes I might forget to put on my socks, something like that. And I had these hundreds of eyes just all peering down at my socks to see if I'd forgotten to put them on that day. But the questions they ask, they know no bounds. They're not embarrassed. They're not anxious. They just ask. So we can learn so much from children. You know, some would call it naivety. I just call it wanting to learn. And they have such a huge, there's just such a sponge wanting to soak up everything you say. And it might have been even a few years since I went to the school, but still, all the children now just say hello to me in the street. They all smile, they all say hello, and then none of them are embarrassed because I've got dementia.
That's brilliant.
Mm.
I love the socks and I love the ball of wool.
Yeah.
So we've still got a few questions, but I don't think, I'm afraid, that we'll have a time to answer them all. The last question I'm going to ask you, you may want to pass on this. You may want to pass because we don't want you to break any secrets at all.
All right.
But Kate Fallows is asking, are there any plans, Wendy, for a third book?
Well, I never say never. I never imagined there would be a first book, never mind a second book. So I've stopped saying never.
And that's all she's going to say.
That's all I'm going to say. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Wendy. You've been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop firing questions at you now.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. That was amazing. Thank you so much, Wendy and Philly. The chat is absolutely packed full of appreciation for your inspiration and your determination to outmaneuver dementia, and your positive and your realism and the warmth of your approach to life, Wendy, and your generosity and kindness in sharing it with others. It's just amazing, and thank you for being part of today. Really appreciate it.
I had a lovely time. Thank you.
I'm glad you still had your hug in a mug.
Oh yeah, so am I.
And thank you to Philly, who very sensitively and beautifully took that conversation along wonderfully well. And thank you very much, Philly, for doing that for us today.
It's been a real privilege.
You made it very easy for me, Philly. Thank you.
Yeah, it was really lovely. In the follow-up email, there'll be a link to the webinar recording. I know that's been asked for quite a bit in the chat. Also, there will be news about the discount code for Wendy's book. Did we mention the book? I think we did.
Anybody know I've written a book?
It's easy to find the first one as well, and I absolutely recommend them both. I think a lot of people have already read them and would really want to share this webinar as well. So Philly's doing an encore for us next month. Thank you. Wendy mentioned hope, and that's a big part of our next webinar, Dementia, Disability and Hope, on the 16th of March. And Philly will be in conversation with 3 people, George, Nigel and Dreyanne, about human rights and disability rights and how important hope is within for those who are living with dementia. So I'm going to close for now, just with a big thank you to Wendy and Philly again, and also to say thank you very much to all the attendees who participated in a very lively chat.
Yeah, thank you all for attending.
Thank you. Thanks very much.